Hello everyone, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Compression Thinking series. My name is Ethan Berry and I'm joined by Robert Doc Hall, co-founder of the Compression Institute and Professor Emeritus at the Indiana University Kelley School of Business. Doc's career started in engineering and manufacturing. His experience in these fields is what paved the way for his realization that current business models are contributing to the destruction of our planet. How do we get along without leaving too much of a mess? How do we adapt to a changing environment? Well, these are some of the questions Doc has been asking his entire career. This series is about how you can help to make a difference by making nature a stakeholder in your business or community. To do this, we need to change our values. But before we can do that, we need to change the way we think. If you enjoy this series, please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Doing so helps us spread this program to more people and more communities who may benefit from the message. Now, you may be wondering what we mean when we use the word compression. Well, in the context of this podcast, compression is a reference to the squeeze we are putting on nature. To ease the compression of nature, we need to compress the way we live. Compression thinking is a guide to help us do just this, hopefully before it's too late. So how do you become a compression thinker? Well, you'll just have to keep listening to find out. Today, we are talking about grass and biodiversity. So let's start things off, Doc. What is biodiversity?
Well, biodiversity is the tendency of nature left to itself to maximize biomass in almost any area given the conditions of that area. That sounds fairly technical. That means they want to grow as many weeds as possible where you don't want them. That's what it means if you're looking at your backyard.
No, not the weeds.
Yes. And so when you get that, you get not some monocrop like grass. We're going to talk about that. What you get is a variety of plants, flowers, a grass, insects, things that'll eat the insects, things that'll eat the things that eat the insects, a variety. And nature keeps wanting to promote that. We don't like it, so we grow grass. And so that seems to be a symbol of our mastery over the nature.
Mm-hmm. Well, how does grass relate to the concept of biodiversity?
Well, most grass that's grown and cut is, first of all, a lot of it is a non-native species. So you're introducing something that didn't want to be there to begin with, and then you kill off everything that isn't grass. And so the total process of doing that is pretty destructive. There's this old, God's talking to St. Francis and starts out, well, why do people grow so much grass? They must like grass to grow. No, they don't. They cut it short, and so they have to water it more. They pay for that. Well, do they make hay out of the cuttings? No, they pay to have it hauled away. I mean, it doesn't fertilize the ground? No, then they buy fertilizer, and some of that runs off, of course, so the grass will grow. Well, they must like it when it's hot and the summer heat turns it brown and the growth stops. No. They keep it going because they water it more and keep cutting. Whoa. Well, surely they have trees, and then the leaves fall, and then the leaves are kind of a natural mulch that holds moisture in the ground, and where it's cold, it prevents the freezing from going so deep. Oh, no, they don't do that. They break up all the leaves. They'll pay to have them hauled away. Then what do they do? Well, they get mulch. They buy it. Well, where do people get mulch? Well, they grind up trees for the mulch. Well, this wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't such big scale. Well, this old story exaggerates what most of us do. Unfortunately, there probably are a few people that really do take care of their lawn that way. But let's go on. The scale of this is big. We have residential lawns, we have golf courses, we have roadsides, we have campuses, we have all kinds of places where we grow grass. And one estimate of the total area of grass grown in the United States is almost the size of the state of Oklahoma.
When you explain it like that, it really kind of illustrates how ridiculous it really is. Where does this start, the tradition of cutting grass?
Well, if you went back 250, 300 years ago, you couldn't cut grass automatically and very easily mechanically. They only had iron tools, and only the chief schmucks of the day, royalty chiefly, could afford to waste servants' energy neatly cutting grass so it looks fresh mown and pouring the water to it. Didn't have pumps and hoses then. And so this was a big deal. You were high status if you had cut grass. As time went on, we had first some kind of reel lawnmowers. We called them Armstrongs. You'd push them. And now you could cut some grass, but you got tired if you cut very much, so people didn't grow a lot of grass. But you made some big rigs, and then they could have golf courses. And back when, like in the 19th century, only people that had real money could afford to play golf on a golf course.
Well, thank God for technology, right? We're able to have perfectly kept lawns now and play golf as much as we want.
Oh, yeah, and it's just about anybody and everybody will play golf. And by the way, golf courses are enormous hogs for water, especially in a place like Texas where, what's wrong with playing golf on something that looks brown instead of green? But, that gets you to fashions and fads and what we do or don't like and just plain flat culture that comes with this.
From what you just said, it just kind of dawns on me that the lifestyle that many of us are living today is maybe not identical, but it's a lot more close to the life royalty used to live than, your average serf.
Oh, yeah. What was something distinctive to an earlier generation becomes something desired to a younger one. And over time, something that was a luxury becomes almost a necessity, or we think it is. Naturalists like E.O. Wilson and some others have simply said that the die-off rate of various species worldwide is alarming.
The term I keep hearing get tossed around is it's a mass extinction event.
Yes, it could be, particularly if you warp the biosphere enough that almost nothing could live there, or at least nothing that's living there now can live quite the same way. The popular markers of this are honeybees and monarch butterflies.
Yeah, pollinators.
Yes, the pollinators, and those are markers. That doesn't come out very often in newscasts. If that's happening to the things that most people see, what's happening to all the stuff that ordinarily we don't see?
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons that doesn't come across on newscasts is very often you have people who aren't as literate as you would hope in the subject they're talking about. They're just reporting back papers that they've read that they may or may not have misunderstood.
Or they're just reporting because somebody has fomented a demonstration about it, and they don't really understand what the demonstration was about.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about E.O. Wilson earlier. He cites that we need to abandon somewhere between 15 to 50% of Earth back to nature to kind of get back to where we used to be. Do you think that's plausible, given the increase in human population that we've seen over the past, let's say, 100 years?
Yes, I think it's possible. And here's why. When you hear this, you think, well, biodiversity is something that affects people in Madagascar, and if we just let a big nature preserve grow in Madagascar, we got the problem covered. No, biodiversity is local. And the grass starts to bring that out.
Yeah, so let's say that the President of the United States hears this podcast and he starts implementing all these sweeping laws to change some of the stuff that we're talking about, make some real change, and people start encouraging biodiversity in their own lawns. What would that look like, How would we benefit if we started doing something like that?
Oh, at first, everybody just say, you mean we're supposed to grow more weeds? Yeah. The weeds will differentiate after a while. I actually tried this once upon a year. Had a field that was mostly barren, just let it grow. Well, the short root weeds popped up first. It looked pretty bad, but just let it go. Pretty soon the grasses caught on. In about 5 years, it began to look like what most of us in the Midwest then would call a meadow. It didn't look bad.
Well, why do you think people have this aversion for weeds growing in their yards?
Oh, they think they look ugly, and then they have the fetish for the nicely grown grass. Instead of that, let's make it look nice.
Yeah, I know a lot of communities, especially, subdivisions will have homeowners associations that they're practically, regulating that you have to keep your grass cut. If your grass isn't well kept, it's kind of viewed in the same way as if you walked out of your house wearing your pajamas, and you hadn't shaven. People think you're a little unkempt.
Yes, and this high status thing over time transferred that if you don't do it, it's a low status thing. If you're not keeping up your lawn, most towns will get on your case. In fact, the town where I live just had a protest about that at last night's city council meeting. that there are too many lawns that look unkempt. And why? Because the popular belief is that takes the property value down. We can't have that.
I don't know what to say to that. The property value, that makes sense, that's how people think. But it's kind of alarming, if you think about all the ways that someone who's living in a subdivision, if they stopped growing all the grass and stopped being as wasteful as they are, and they made an effort to, grow some produce in their front yard, for example. There's a lot of benefits to doing that.
Yeah, if you really had to, people would do it. I know people had victory gardens in World War II. At the time, nobody thought, a victory garden was just growing veggies and things to provide food so that the farms could supply the troops at war. That was a victory garden, and I remember squashing potato bugs in a victory garden. But everybody was doing it, so it was okay. Now, that could come back, and you don't want people having ordinances that you can't grow vegetables in your yard because it doesn't look nice. That's a cultural shift.
One of the points we should make here is increasing biodiversity on a local level. You made that point earlier, actually, about what does it matter if we have all this biodiversity in Madagascar if, in New York City, for example, there is none. What are some ways we can promote biodiversity on a local level in, let's say an urban environment like New York City?
Yeah, New York is a particularly tough case because especially Manhattan is just about all paved over now. It's a big rock. But elsewhere, where you currently have lawn suburbs, what do you do? And in rural especially, you can help nature to help itself. Dish it out a little bit, loosen the soil, let it absorb more water. If soil absorbs more water, it automatically begins to grow more, and your growing more puts carbon into the soil and it builds topsoil. It's slow, but it begins that.
How does growing grass impact the quality of your soil?
Usually, if you just have grass, over time it compacts because it doesn't keep it loose and absorbing water, more water will run off of it. So, like City of Seattle, I understand they have a program now to combat their rain runoff problem, and they'll call them rain gardens. You can call them soak gardens. You can call them something else. This is just loosening soil so that more of the water stays in some little puddle and penetrates into the soil. Place where I live right now could benefit from that because it has a runoff problem. So if you are helping nature in your town do things like this, you are benefiting because you're going to have more pollinators. People don't like them because they're bugs. Well, get used to living around a little more nature and recognize what benefit it does for you. Yeah, sure, you can get mosquito bit and all kinds of bad things may happen. And I've been bit before a good many times. I'm still alive. And get rid of using so much herbicide, pesticide, spraying everything for mosquitoes. If the water soaks in, you don't have standing pools very long. You don't have that many mosquitoes. And so it's working with nature to help nature do what it wants to do while still leaving a reasonable living environment for us. You learn to live with nature.
It's important for this discussion, the distinction between a park and a wildlife preserve. Could you go into that a little bit for our listeners?
A wildlife preserve is a place where the people don't disturb it. If they go there, not very many do, and they don't make it suitable for people to be really comfortable there. They make it so that nature will thrive there. The easiest example I can think of is a place where I lived where across the creek was just a swampy thicket.
Mm-hmm.
And, had everything living there, deer and coyotes and big water birds that stop through. And, geez, it was a nice pit stop for migrating fowl in the right time of the year. In spring of the year, I noticed especially the bird noise over there was tremendous, so you could hardly get through this thing. I waded up into there a little ways 3 times, and pretty soon you could get to where you could almost reach out and touch a bird, and the noise was tremendous. Well, the town decided this whole thing was an eyesore and it needed to be developed. They made a park out of it so people could see this. When they did, about 90% of all that life disappeared because you destroyed the environment in which it thrived. And so if you have a nature preserve, that's not a park for people to go observe very much. That's a place for nature to do its thing. And could you have nature preserves around major cities? Well, if you could keep people from going into them, I think you could.
What would the benefit be if, let's just take America, for example, if we started, sectioning off certain pieces of land as wildlife preserves? What would the effect be?
Well, the effect would be that you would have to really, really sit on people that want to develop those places. That's an old story in the United States. If the property just looks like it's scrap land, it's going to be worth a whole lot more if we develop it and make a suburb or something else out of it.
It's just like nature is just another object for some people.
It's true. It is something to be exploited. It's not something with which you have an attachment and you decide how to live with it.
Yeah, I think the point that some people are missing when they have that other mentality is that we are part of the environment. Our fate is intrinsically attached to the fate of the planet. Unless we build a rocket and colonize Mars, we're stuck here.
And that's extrapolating from prevailing thought. You mean you're going to colonize Mars? You can't even take care of Earth.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think it's so hard for people to see the importance of nature and biodiversity?
Because our mentality for a long time has been that we are successful if we defeat nature. We make it do something that we want it to do. And changing that is not going to be a real easy thing. And just talking about lawns, if you wanted to grow more weeds, you can hear the uproar now. Think of the maybe 1 million or 2 jobs that are going to be lost, and think of all the people that make the equipment for lawns, and think all the companies that are going to go bankrupt, and, all those whatabouts. Well, if you didn't do that, particularly here in Texas, they're growing a drought-resistant kind of lawn. It's called xeriscape. So what you do is plant stuff that wants to be there. We started out with grass. A good part of our grass is now converted to some little nasty thing that really wants to be there. The fortunate thing is that when everybody else's grass dies out, that'll still be there and green. But it doesn't really look bad to me. This is what aesthetic reaction you have to it. And changing opinions about that is not going to be an easy thing at all. And then the scream about any of these things always is, this monster has to keep going because we don't know what we'd do if we didn't have all these companies and all these jobs.
Circling back your guidelines for compression thinking, how can they be used to address this issue?
This one illustrates pretty well quality over quantity, and it accepts that Earth is finite. You got to learn to live with what's here.
All these guidelines are kind of linked. It also, symbiotic thinking. Your yard it can be your friend, It can be the place where you have your tomatoes and whatever it is you're into growing.
Yeah, well, where we live, we have a little piddly nature thing for the yard. I've noticed that the life there is decreasing a bit. I've not yet seen a toad this year. You see quite a few. I don't know what has happened to the toads.
Do you think we're past a tipping point on this, Doc?
I hope not. I kind of know what happened to that yard. There was a big field of weeds just south of there, and there's a development going in, so they cut all the weeds, and now it's grass. So some of the birds and an awful lot of the insects that used to come up to the yard have to come further. And that's kind of what I mean by this. Biodiversity is local, and to think about it, yeah, you got to think symbiotically. We're part of nature. Any major decision, think about what the effects with nature will be, not just on you or what you think might get a higher property value or whatever you got in mind. Quality over quantity. What's real quality? Well, quality is the quality of life, all life. It's our life, of course, but our life depends on all other life. So if you're talking quality in that sense, how do you promote the quality of life anywhere and everywhere that supports us? Because it does.
And that's a wrap, folks. If you enjoyed listening to this, please feel free to join us in our weekly teleconferences where we discuss the problems you and your community are facing while trying to think of possible solutions. The problems we're up against are way too large for any one person to tackle on their own. It takes all of us coming together. These dialogue sessions happen every Tuesday. You can participate by calling the number provided on our webpage. Times, topics, and the number to call are all found under the Compression Thinking Series tab on our website, www.compression.org. Also, please do not forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. If we're going to make a dent in some of the issues we discussed today, it will take all of us coming together, and your support helps. I know it feels as if we've merely scratched the surface of this topic, so if you're interested in learning more, you can check out Doc's many papers, videos, and book reviews at the same website, www.compression.org. Thanks for listening, everyone.